hook. They said the fence was just wood and wire, but for me, it was a line drawn in the dirt between what was mine and what they thought they could take. I never imagined a simple fence would start a war between a man trying to protect his homie, a broken bar, and an HOA president who thought power meant ownership. When I saw the for sale sign planted on my pasture on my land, I felt my blood turn cold. They'd gone too far, and by the time I was done, the whole town would know exactly what happens when you mess with the rancher's home, his land, and his pride. The sun was just starting to rise over the rolling fields when I noticed it had that ugly white sign sticking out of the ground like a splinter in my palm. For sale. I blinked twice, thinking maybe I was seeing things. But no, there it was, right in the middle of my east pasture, where my cattle grazed every morning. I shut off the old Ford, heart pounding in my chest, and walked over. The dirt was still soft around the post they'd just put it up. My name wasn't anywhere on it. Instead, it read, Lot 17B available now. Contact Silver Ridge HOA for details. Lot 17B. My land didn't have a lot number. I bought this ranch long before some city folks decided to turn the neighboring fields into a planned community. But ever since the Silver Ridge HOA started expanding, they'd been inching closer. First the boundary surveys, then the easement arguments, and now a broken bar. I clenched my jaw. I knew exactly who was behind it. Marcia Duvall, president of the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association. The kind of woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. The kind who'd tell you she understands country life while wearing heels that cost more than a horse saddle. She'd been pestering me for months to consider selling part of my property. Said it would increase neighborhood harmony. I told her harmony was fine, as long as it didn't mean losing an inch of what my grandfather left me. Guess she didn't like that answer. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and stared at the open fields. The air was still, the crickets quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. I thought about Grandpa, how his calloused hands built every fence post by hand, how he'd say, a man's land is part of his soul. Lose one, and you lose the other. And right then, I made up my mind. If Marcia wanted boundaries blurred, I'd make sure she saw them clearer than ever. The next morning, I loaded my truck with cedar posts and barbed wire. My neighbor, Carl, caught sight of me and came over. You building a new fence? He asked. Not new, I said, tightening my gloves. Just reminding folks where the old one stands. Word spread fast. By noon, a few home members came driving up in their shiny SUVs, watching me like I was committing a crime. I ignored them, hammering in post after post, the sound echoing like gunfire across the ridge. By sunset, the line was drawn clean, straight, undeniable. That fence wasn't just a barrier, it was a message. When I finally saw Marcia drive up, arms crossed, lips pursed tight, I knew the battle had begun. She stepped out, heels sinking in the dirt. Mr. Walker, she said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. I hope you understand that area is under HOA jurisdiction now. I smiled, leaning on the post. Funny, I said, I don't recall signing anything that gives you rights to my land. Her smile faltered. We have documentation. Then you can show it in court, I said. Until then, stay on your side of the fence. And as she drove off in a cloud of dust, I looked back at that line I built, sturdy, proud, shining under the last light of day. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It was the beginning of something much bigger. A fight for respect, a fight for family, a fight for the land that still remembered every step my father and grandfather ever took. And I wasn't planning on losing. For the first few days after I built that fence, things were quiet, too quiet. The HOA folks stopped waving when they passed my ranch. The usual early morning joggers who used to cut across my field suddenly took the long way around. Even the mailman looked uneasy dropping my letters off. But I didn't mind. Silence meant peace, or so I thought. Then one morning, I woke up to the sound of shouting. I threw on my boots and rushed outside. 3 men in neon vests were on my property, tearing down the eastern section of my fence. My fence, the one I'd spent 3 long days building in the Texas heat. What in the hell do you think you're doing? I yelled. One of them turned around, clipboard in hand. Oh, order, he said casually. "This fence violates community guidelines." I saw red. "Community guidelines? This ain't your community, this is my ranch." But before I could say another word, Marsha's silver SUV came rolling down the dirt road like she was the sheriff of the county. She stepped out, her hair perfect as ever, holding a stack of papers. "Good morning, Mr. Walker," she said with that same practiced smile. "We're just correcting a boundary misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I said. "You're trespassing." She waved the papers. "We've got a surveyor's report. This land technically falls under Silver Ridge jurisdiction. You should have consulted us before putting up your fence." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper from boiling over. "My granddad built that fence line 50 years ago. You can take your jurisdiction and shove it." Her smile cracked for just a second. Then she said, "I suggest you cooperate, or we'll take legal action." "Then take it," I said, stepping between her and the workers. "But until a judge tells me otherwise, not 1 inch of this land moves." I stood there as the man hesitated, glancing at Marsha. She pursed her lips, then finally said, "Pack it up, we'll settle this the formal way." When they left, I felt a knot of anger and worry in my gut. I didn't have the money for lawyers. Folks like Marsha, they knew that. That's how they won. But I had something stronger than money. I had the truth, and a community that still believed in right and wrong. So I went digging. I spent nights at the county records office, pulling dusty maps and old deeds. The clerk, an old friend of my father's, helped me find what I needed: a hand-signed land grant, dated 1964, clearly marking my property line exactly where I'd rebuilt that fence. I couldn't help but smile when I saw Grandpa's name on the document. His handwriting was rough and stubborn, just like him. A few days later, I decided to return the favor. I printed copies of that deed and attached one to the fence post closest to Silver Ridge. Right beside it, I hung a big sign that read, "Private property, trespassers will be reported." By sunset, the whole neighborhood had seen it. Some whispered, some laughed, and some, especially Marsha, looked like they'd swallowed a lemon. But it didn't stop there. The next week, I started getting letters, official ones, from the HOA demanding I remove my unauthorized barrier. Every time, I sent back a copy of the deed. Every time, they ignored it. So I took the fight public. Carl helped me post pictures and videos online of the fence, the land, the documents, and the truth about what was happening. Turns out, people love a story about a small rancher standing up to a bully home. Within days, the post spread. Thousands of people commented, sharing their own stories about being pushed around by neighborhood associations. Reporters started calling. And then, one morning, a TV crew pulled up to the ranch. I didn't want attention, I just wanted my home back. But if that was what it took to make her stop, I'd do it. They filmed the fence, the pasture, and even interviewed me. I told them what my granddad always said: a land ain't about money, it's about memory. And no one can buy that. That night, the segment aired on local news. And suddenly, Marsha wasn't smiling anymore. The next home meeting was packed. Neighbors who'd never spoken up before started questioning her leadership, demanding explanations. Someone even played the news clip during the meeting, right as she tried to defend herself. I didn't go, I didn't need to. But Carl did. He told me later that people started clapping when my name came up. A week later, I got an envelope from the county office. Inside was a formal notice: HOA claim denied, property boundaries reaffirmed. I stared at the paper for a long time. I should have felt relief, and I did, but mostly, I just felt a broken bar tired. This land had always been more than just dirt and grass. It was my family's legacy, and I'd almost lost it because someone thought they could take without asking. The next morning, I rode out to the fence again. The air was cool, the sunrise spilling gold across the hills. The new boards gleamed, solid and proud. Marsha's SUV passed by, slower this time. She didn't roll down her window, didn't wave, just drove on. Her perfect little world suddenly smaller than she thought. I watched her go, then turned back to my fence. That line wasn't just about keeping people out anymore. It was about standing your ground, for what's right, for what's yours, for the people who came before you. And maybe, in some way, It reminded everyone, even her aide, that you can't build a community on greed and control. You build it on respect. As I leaned on that fence, the wind carrying the smell of cedar and dust, I thought about Grandpa's words again. A man's land is part of his soul. I smiled. Guess we're both still standing, old man, I whispered. Because in the end, the fence didn't just keep them out. It kept me in a grounded, strong, and proud of who I was. And that's something no hoe can ever take away.